Hello, this is Myra Elaine on the Buying Space channel. I'm doing the adult Bible studies, and these are adult Bible studies. And today is Martin Luther King Day. It's the reading is from 2 Samuel chapter 14 verses 1 to 20. And before we get started in reading chapter 14, David is king. Saul is no longer an issue. King David has defeated many of his enemies. And he has a palace. And he has wives and concubines and grown children from his wives and concubines. And this should be a good time in his life. But he is depressed. He is pacing because what has happened is his heir to the throne, Amnon, raped his half-sister. And the full brother of his half-sister, his half-brother, murdered him because he raped his sister. Now, before you judge the brother that avenged his sister's rape, I want to say this. When this happened, King David did nothing. He could have had his son executed for raping his daughter. He could have banished him. He could have moved his very beautiful daughter to another location to protect her. Because the truth was, Amnon was in succession to the throne. So if he as a prince is going to rape his half-sister, what would prevent him from continuing to rape her? Especially after he became king. But nothing was done by anybody except for the full brother. And the full brother was banished for that to the land of the Moabites. And David would stand on his palace roof and pace back and forth and look to the east, to the land of the Moabites, where his favorite son was. And unfortunately, the succession of the kingdom to his oldest son was more important than his daughter. But it wasn't more important to her brother. So there's where we start at. Joab is the leader of King David's armed forces, and he's very concerned about what has happened and the state of mind of the king and the uncertainty of the succession of the kingdom is also a question. So Joab, the son of Zeruiah, perceived that the king's heart was concerned about Absalom. Absalom is the banished son that killed his half-brother for raping his full sister. And Joab sent to Tekoa and brought from there a wise woman and said to her, "Please pretend to be a mourner and put on mourning apparel. Do not anoint yourself with oil, but act like a woman who has been mourning a long time for the dead. Go to the king and speak to him in this manner." So Joab put the words in her mouth. And then the woman of Tekoa spoke to the king. She fell to her face to the ground and prostrated herself and said, "Help, O king!" Then the king said to her, "What troubles you?" And she answered, Indeed, I am a widow. My husband is dead. Now your maidservant has 2 sons, and the 2 sons fought with each other in the field, and there was no one to part them. But one struck the other and killed him, and now the whole family has risen up against your maidservant. And they said, deliver him who struck his brother, that we may execute him for the life of his brother, whom he killed, and we will destroy the heir also. So they extinguish my ember that is left, to leave to my husband neither name nor remnant on the earth. Then the king said to the woman, go to your house, and I will give you orders concerning you. And the woman of Tekoa said to the king, my lord, O king, let the iniquity be on me and my father's house, and the king on his throne be guiltless. So the king said, whoever says anything to you, bring him to me, and I shall not touch you any more. Then she said, please let the king remember the Lord your God, and do not permit the avenger of blood to destroy any more, lest thy destroy my son. And he said, as the Lord lives, not one hair of your son shall fall to the ground. Therefore the woman said, please let your maidservant speak another word to my lord king. And he said, say on. So the woman said, why then have you schemed such a thing against the people of God? For the king speaks this thing as to one who is guilty, in that the king does not bring his banished one home again. For we will surely die and become like the water spilled on the ground, which cannot be gathered up again. Yet God does not take away a life, but he devises means so that his banished ones are not expelled from him. Now therefore I have come to speak of this thing to my lord the king, because the people have made me afraid. And your maidservant said, I will now speak of to the king. It may be that the king will perform the request of his maidservant. For the king will hear and deliver the maidservant from the hand of the man who would destroy me and my son together from the inheritance of God. Your maidservant said, the word of my lord the king will now be comforting, for as the angel of God, so is my lord the king in discerning good and evil. And may the Lord your God be with you. Then the king answered and said to the woman, please do not hide from me anything that I ask you. And the woman said, please let my lord the king speak. So the king said, is the hand of Joab with you in all of this? And the woman answered and said, as you live, my lord king, no one can turn to the right hand or to the left hand from anything that my lord the king has spoken. For your servant Joab commanded me, and he put all these words in the mouth of your maidservant, to bring about all this change of affairs. Your servant Joab has done this thing, but my Lord is wise, according to the wisdom of the angel of the Lord, to know everything that is on the earth. And the king said to Joab, all right, I have granted this thing. Go therefore, bring back the young man Absalom. Then Joab fell to the ground on his face and bowed himself and thanked the king. And Joab said, Today your servant knows that I have found favor in your sight, my lord, O king. And the king was fulfilled of the request of his servant. So Joab rose and went to Geshur and brought back Absalom to Jerusalem. And the king said, Let him return to me to his own house, but do not let him see my face. So Absalom returned to his own house, but did not see the king's face. Now in all Israel there was no one who was praised as much as Absalom for his good looks, from the sole of his toe to the crown of his head, and there was no blemish in him. So Absalom was loved. And really, he did what his father should have done. But his father didn't want to do that because he was more concerned about politics. But he ended up, through his inaction, being depressed because his daughter was tarnished, his favorite son was banished, and the people of Israel mourned with him. And they looked at Absalom as a hero. They didn't want a king that was immoral and a tyrant and that would have raped his half-sister with no conscience. They knew what kind of king he would be. They couldn't look upon Amnon as anointed by God after what he'd done to his own half-sister. How can we anoint a king or appoint a public official that has raped probably a little girl? How can we do that? Israel needed to stand on morals for their leaders. They needed to stand on wisdom for their leaders. And so does every nation on the planet. You all have a wonderful and blessed day.